managed to recognize the host of the launch party to which I had been invited. I seem to have mislaid the course of my thoughts. Never you mind, old boy. Hooking a broad thumb in the sleeve hole of his waistcoat, Lord Fusible clapped his other hand on my shoulder with sufficient force to embed a row of bolt heads into my opposite ribs. Pinned between the iron window frame and my gregarious interlocutor, I endured his ripely alcoholic breath. "'Tis not a moment for thinking. Your father was man enough for all that. We're the fortunate heirs to his genius. Our task is but to celebrate." "You're too kind." Above his balding head, I could see over to where Captain Crowcroft had enlisted about himself the party's female regiment, their sly chatter and admiring lash-fringed glances obviously more congenial than my ruminations. In a construct such as this, fortunately, my glass was empty as I indicated the lighthouse's bridge with a wide sweep of my hand. My father's contribution is, you must admit, only a small fraction of an ambitious sum. Fusible nodded, lower lip jutting out in approval of my familial modesty. Nevertheless, he raised a spatulate finger in front of my eyes. An essential contribution. I appreciate your saying as much. A few of the women had overheard the braying compliment. In the circular confines of the bridge, it would have been impossible not to, and directed a mute, mildly curious inquiry toward me. Of course, the only thing I might have appreciated even more. My tongue tasted salt as I bit my lip, sealing the words behind it. The wine had seemingly ebbed far enough in my brain to restore a degree of circumspection to my speech. It would have been rash to point out to Lord Fusible that the limited corporation he headed had not yet seen fit to honour my father's memory with a cash payment to his son, for the use of whatever clever device had been posthumously fitted to the lighthouse's navigational systems. From my previous encounters with the wealthy and powerful, I knew the delicacy with which they needed to be approached on all matters remunerative. One of the fond conceits of those with a lavishment of money is to imagine that all whom they encounter love them for themselves alone. And that's why you're here with us today. Fusible's bullish enthusiasm allowed little notice of whatever I might have said or not said. He grabbed my arm with both his hands and tugged me toward the center of the bridge. "Make way," he shouted, "for the guest of honor." The fashionable crowd parted for us as though the others were a glittering Red Sea and Fusible Mimosas, with a single strolling Israelite to ferry from Migdol to Baal-Zephon. "This is an excellent spot." Fusible turned me about in front of the intimidating devices at the rear of the bridge, a thicket of polished brass levers and pipes, the latter branching and connecting at all angles, seemingly for no other purpose than to confuse the eye and intimidate the mind. A constellation of gauges surrounded me, the red needles quivering and darting across the numbered dials like the slender beaks of hummingbirds. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished officers of Phototrope Limited, if I may request your indulgence." The jumbled conversations dwindled to murmurs, then silence. All faces turned toward us, the motion distressingly similar to that of an artillery battalion directing its cannons toward its target. "So good of you to take the time," cooed a female voice at my side. Lady Fusible was of even more diminutive stature than her husband, but possessed of one of those intimidating bosoms upon which a diamond necklace rested, as horizontal as though displayed upon a jeweller's velvet cushion. She took my arm in both her kid-gloved hands. "Your invitation was my idea, you know." "Oh," I gave a nod, unsure as to what other noise I should make. "Very kind of you." Lord Fusible pressed on. "I believe none would disagree with me." He arched his back, presumably to expand his lungs for full stentorian effect. "That the limits of man's creativity have been reached here and now in our good Victoria's reign." I could see a slip of paper tucked inside his jacket cuff, with minutely scrawled prompts upon it. "For proof of that assertion, one need but look around oneself." The paper assumed its own fluttering trajectory as Fusible cast his arms wide. "That of which men have dreamt, men have conceived, or invented." Without his aid memoir, now lying like a dead moth at the toe of his boot, he wandered past the vaguely